Welcome everyone to another webinar. This one is with Draftrs Insurance, and Audrey has come to explain to us why we need insurance, what insurance we may need, and to do a question and answer afterwards, and to set up for possibly other webinars based on other things that might be necessary for, like, I think contracts and stuff like that. So um, we're going to go ahead and let her take over with a presentation to start. And then after that, we're going to do some questions and answers. So while we're going through the presentation, in the chat, if you could go ahead and write down out any questions you have, that would be great. And we'll try to get to them uh, as time allows. So Audrey, go ahead and share your screen and start your presentation, please. And if everybody could mute, that would be great.
Okay, so I think it says that you've disabled participant screen sharing. So Dennis might want to turn it on again.
Let's see, advanced sharing options. All participants. Oh, here we go. Try that now.
Okay, yeah, that works.
Okay, go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, great. So can everybody see my screen now? Okay, perfect. Okay, great. So good afternoon, everyone, or maybe good morning, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining today and dialing in. My name is Audrey Lau. I oversee insurance programs and partnerships for Draftrs, and Draftrs is an insurance program administrator for Markel Insurance Company's small firm architects and engineers, which will include building designers, professional liability program. So we are partnered also with AIBD, which is how I got to know some of the members in this Facebook group. And we do these webinars also with AIBD, but I know that some in this group are not part of AIBD, but we're looking to get a lot more involved with the building designers community. I think what you all are doing, we really serve your niche, right? I think you're a segment of the population that has been underserved by the insurance community, and our product, coincidentally, it really aligns with what you all are doing. So I'm really looking forward to working more with AIBD and then the Facebook group and other building designers as well. So today, as Dennis mentioned, we're going to be talking about insurance, but specifically professional liability insurance. I'm going to go over a couple things. This presentation looks a little bit familiar. So as I talk to more AIBD members and I do presentations, a couple questions like always come up. So I kind of updated my deck so that it addresses some of the questions that I'm constantly hearing from people and some of the concerns. So the presentation might look a little bit different. Like Audrey, I know you attended the last one with AIBD, so this will be good. It's not going to be a total repeat of that. So what we're going to go over today is first, what is professional liability? Is it mandatory? That's a question that comes up. Do you actually need professional liability insurance? What do claims look like? We're also going to look at the difference between professional liability and general liability, and then also discuss just a little bit about how the policy is actually triggered. So first, what is professional liability? So professional liability, you might have heard other people refer to it as errors and omissions insurance. It's all the same thing. Professional liability, E&O insurance, it all covers claims for professionals that arise out of their works and services. So this is a little bit different from general liability insurance. Professional liability is really covering you for your work. If there are any errors in your work and somebody ends up suing you for it, then that's what this policy covers. And when we're talking about claims and lawsuits, it doesn't actually have to be a real lawsuit where somebody where there's a lawyer who serves you documents. A claim is also when an owner, like a past owner that you worked for, they send you an email and say, hey, Dennis, you messed up on this project. You owe me $5,000. That's a claim. That's a demand. That's a written demand, and that falls under the definition of a claim. So anybody who comes after you and alleges that you did something wrong, your work was wrong, that's what this professional liability policy is covering. So for professional liability policies, the most likely claimant, the most likely person to do that to you is probably going to be a past client. And about 70% of professional liability claims are from clients of the insured. So the other 30% can be non-contractual third parties. So perhaps you have a job and some third-party pedestrian walks through the site and falls down, and then they name you in the claim, right? That's a non-contractual third party that could potentially also be a claimant under this policy, but most likely it's actually going to be your client. So these professional policies do a couple things. The first thing, which I think is pretty important, is it provides legal defense. So if you did get an email from somebody saying, hey, you owe me $5,000, you would then notify this insurance policy carrier. And the carrier would actually go provide you with the defense. They'd arrange for you to have a lawyer. They'd cover those defense costs. And then if you are found to be liable for any type of damages, the insurance policy will cover that as well, right? And one thing I wanted to point out about that is that a lot of professional liability policies, they only cover financial loss. And if you're working in the AEC industry, which building designers are, you want to make sure that you get a professional liability policy that also covers bodily injury and property damage. Because obviously you're drawing houses, what could happen? The house could fall down, things like that. So there's definitely going to be property damage exposure and also potentially bodily injury. So when you're looking for a professional policy, all of them will always cover financial loss, but not all of them will cover bodily injury or property damage. So that's something pretty important to keep an eye out for. Did we want to do questions as we go, Dennis, or should
that depends. So far, I mean, if we get through your presentation, if you see a question on the chat, I'm assuming you can see the chat.
I can't. Well, it's hard. I can't because I have
Okay.
that share screen up, so I can see the two on the chat. I see two.
So
maybe I'll just stop every once in a while, and if somebody wants to ask a question, we could do that, because sometimes while the stuff is fresh in people's heads, it's easier to ask the question. They might forget about it.
Yeah, I that works. I mean, if you have a question, I think there's a way to just put in the chat. I have it up, so I'll be watching it. I have it on my second monitor that I'm watching that. So if you have a question, go ahead and put it up there, and as soon as I see it, I will let Audrey know, and we'll jump on a question.
Okay, great. So I actually see, I pulled it up. Dennis has a question. You have a question, Dennis, about general liability, but that's actually going to be my next slide. So
okay, we'll wait till then.
Okay. So the next slide is really talking about general liability and professional liability. So I think this is something that's very confusing did I already go through? Is it mandatory? No, I haven't gone through. The next slide is professional liability mandatory. So, I think a lot of people don't know this, but within the business insurance context, very few products are actually mandatory by law. So there's no law that says that you have to carry business insurance. And so you don't have to carry any insurance if you don't want to. It's really a matter of your own kind of risk tolerance. The only insurance line that actually is mandatory in some states is workers' compensation. So workers' comp is mandatory, but it also depends on a couple of things, right? It varies by state. Some states say that if you are a self-employed person, you don't have to carry workers' comp. If you hire more than 3 employees, you need to carry workers' compensation. So it's really state specific. In Texas, for example, Texas is one of the few states that doesn't have any workers' compensation requirements. So you can waive out of the workers' comp program. But you'll have to check with your state to see what their rules are, because sometimes if you're a sole practitioner, it's not required. If you have, I think it's a lot of times it's 2 employees or more, that's when it's required. But workers' comp is really the only line that is actually required. Everything else, professional liability, general liability, that's not required by law. Some states will require you to carry professional to obtain licenses. So this is very common for things like real estate agents, insurance brokers. Like for drafters, when we set up our agency, we had to evidence insurance. But you'll be surprised to know that a lot of architects in states, architects don't have insurance requirements. A lot of them choose to buy it themselves, but there are no professional liability insurance requirements to get licensed. So many professions actually have no requirements. Same thing like engineers. I don't think they actually have, I think, land surveyors in certain states, they're required. Landscape architects, they're not required either. It's very specific to professions. And obviously building designers, there's no requirement by law that you all carry professional liability either. What is most common is actually your clients. You're being required to carry it by contract. So a lot of times, professional and general liability are often required by your clients in contract, or for general liability by your landlords, who are going to require you to carry it in order to rent office space from them. So I'll take a pause there on the business insurance requirements. Does anyone have any questions specific to that?
So again,
Okay.
if you have one, please put it in the chat, or let me know. Just say I have a question and I'll go in and unmute you.
Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about was professional versus general liability. So I think a lot of people get confused by this, especially within construction, right? So I think how we like to think about it is professionals are typically like architects, engineers, design professionals, building designers. Those are the professionals. And those professionals require professional liability. And then you have contractors, right? When we're talking about the construction industry, we have contractors and we have design professionals. And the contractors are the ones who do not perform professional services. They're not doing any type of design work. They're not doing engineering. They're not doing architecture. What they are doing is they're doing building, which is considered workmanship. And because of that, they require that general liability policy. So what is the difference between the two, right? So here I did a rough breakout of general liability versus professional liability. So general liability, again, is really to cover, if somebody comes onto your job site, they come to your office, your trailer, whatever, say it's a client, and then they fall down, like maybe there was where you're at a job site, there's a big sinkhole and some pedestrian comes by and falls into that sinkhole. The general liability policy covers those types of trips and falls. The same thing, like it's like at your home on your homeowner's policy. If somebody goes through their sidewalk, falls on a crack, your homeowner's policy pays for that. So you could see as a professional, you don't really have a lot of necessity for that type of policy because a lot of you are working out of your homes, or do you have clients coming to your house? You already have a homeowner's policy. You could probably add an extension to that homeowner's policy to cover in the event that somebody falls down when they're coming in to visit you as your client. So a lot of times professionals don't actually need that GL policy. What they do need is that PL policy. And they need that PL policy not only because it's required by contracts often, but because it is the policy that's actually covering your work, your services that you provide. So a couple of other differences between the GL and the PL. The GL is really just going to cover bodily injury and property damage without any financial loss. So say that person falls into a hole, the policy is going to pay for any type of, if they had to go to the hospital, and then also if there were any type of resulting damages as a result, they can't go to work, et cetera. So that's what that policy is intended to cover. Whereas the professional policy, a lot of policies are only going to cover financial loss. And when we talk about professional, this includes like lawyers, which is why there isn't a lot of policies don't include that bodily injury, property damage, because as a lawyer, you could see how, if you mess up on somebody's somebody's contract, the consequences are usually financial, which is why a lot of professional policies, they only cover financial loss and there's limited BIPD. But just so you know, like the policy that we offer with Markel, it does cover that full bodily injury, property damage for construction professionals. Another major difference between professional and general is that it's just the way that they're written, how the policies are set up. The professional is a claims-made policy, and that's something that's pretty relevant. We'll talk more about that later on, because that's going to determine how much of your work is actually covered under that policy.
Audrey Allen asked, wouldn't those falls, and I think she's talking about what you just talked about right before you switched over. Wouldn't those falls be covered by the general contractor's policy? And why would a designer be required to carry a general liability policy?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So like you are not, as a design professional, you have no obligations for site safety. So that's a big thing. Like site safety is always the contractor's obligation. So when they get a GL policy, that's what it covers. It covers their job site. That's their job site. That's not your job site. That's their job site. So design professionals should never be required. In fact, if somebody says, look, if someone puts an obligation for you to be responsible for site safety, even if they have an obligation for you to report things, you should really push back on that. And that's sometimes owners will say that to a design professional, like you have an obligation to report things that you see are unsafe site conditions. That goes above and beyond what design professionals are typically obligated to do. That's definitely in the contractors. Contractors are always responsible for site safety. So that is the contractor's responsibility. So why would a designer be required to carry a GL policy? You really shouldn't. Most owners are requiring the PL policy. They're not requiring the GL policy. The only time that I would see a designer being required to carry a GL policy is from your landlord, really, in your office building. If you rent office space, a lot of times the landlord is going to require you to have a GL policy to cover when clients come into your office, because their liability policy doesn't cover your immediate office space. So they're going to require you to carry the GL to cover anybody who falls down in your office.
So what
So
about the
Audrey,
designer that takes on, say, project management for a homeowner that's building their own house?
even still, because a project manager, a construction manager, these are all professionals. You're not a contractor, right? You have no obligation for site safety still. So who has the obligation is the owner and the contractor. So either the owner needs to buy a policy covering the site, the work area. It could be an extension of their homeowner's policy or whatever they're doing, because some of those homeowner builder's risk policy will provide those extensions, or you have your contractor responsible for it. But even if you're like the owner's rep, you're a construction manager, you should never be responsible for job site safety. You're not going to have an insurance policy. For example, this PL policy is not going to cover you for that, for job site safety. So Stephanie Thatcher's asked, is professional liability the same as an E&O policy? Yes, it's exactly the same. So a lot of people call it different things, right? Professional liability, errors and omissions, it's the same thing. It's like certain classes, they used to call it an E&O policy, like for lawyers. It was like for lawyers or something, they used to call it an E&O policy. And then for architects, they would call it a professional liability, but it's really the same thing. People use the two interchangeably. It's the same policy form. Okay, so I am moving along now. So one of the most common questions that I get is, do I need this insurance? What is it even covering me for? So for the first part of that question, do I need this insurance? That's not something that I'd like to give you some information to help you answer that, but that's really an individual thing. It really depends on what your risk tolerance is. So whether or not you need this insurance, hopefully I can provide you with some information to help you make that determination. But what is it even covering me for? That's something that I can help with. And it's something that we already mentioned, but why is this not working? But I like to just kind of reiterate, right? What is it even covering me for? Professional liability insurance will cover you in the event you get sued for errors or alleged errors in your work. Alleged errors is really the operative word here, right? Because, maybe you did make a mistake, maybe you didn't make a mistake. The professional liability insurance policy will cover you regardless, because they offer you that defense coverage. So why is this needed? So a couple things. I boiled it down to three main reasons. And the first one is mistakes happen, right? And if a mistake does happen and you do get a lawsuit or a demand from an owner, these lawsuits can be time consuming. You got to figure out, how am I going to get a lawyer? What am I going to say? You have to do all those things. So having a professional liability policy can help you with that, right? It'll help you find a lawyer, and then they could take on the case, and you can go on with running your business. And then second, if in the event that you are found liable, the insurance policy will cover you for those third-party damages. And if those are really big damages, those are things that could really bankrupt a company, right? So there's that financial protection element of it too. So that's one of the main reasons why you might need a professional liability policy. The second thing I wanted to point out is, the AC industry is notoriously litigious. People are suing all the time. And you might have nothing to do with this claim. You might be doing your job perfectly. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to get sued, right? A lot of times people just get dragged into the claim, along with the contractor, the architects, the engineers. Owners are just looking for a source of recovery, and they'll name everybody on the job site in order to try to get that recovery. So a lot of times you might have nothing to do with the claim, but you're just named in the claim, which is why the professional liability can be beneficial, right? Because of, again, that defense. The defense that the carrier is going to take on that defense, they're going to hire a lawyer, they're going to respond to subpoenas, they're going to respond to all these things on your behalf, so that you don't have to waste time doing that. And the third thing, which is why a lot of people actually purchase the insurance, is the contractual requirement. So almost all architects and engineers are being required to carry PL insurance, and it's increasingly common for all other professionals now to be required to carry this PL insurance. And sometimes you can negotiate with owners and get pushed and have them remove it. Sometimes you can't. But I think this is probably one of the main reasons that has driven people to be purchasing professional. And it's even creeping into contractors. A lot of contractors, even if they don't have professional exposure, they're also being asked to carry that professional liability insurance.
So
Oh,
Audrey, while you're doing what you're doing, let me ask you a question. You were talking about um errors that we make and alleged errors. So I just had something with a homeowner that their my drawings got sent back to me from the surveyor because they couldn't lay out the house because I was missing two dimensions, which were actually not missing, just shown differently, and would have been easier had I shown it the way they wanted it rather than them having to do about 3 seconds worth of math. The homeowner mentioned that, well, if they're going to charge me more, I may have to put this back on you for the time. Would that be what you're talking about, where I really didn't make a mistake, but it's being alleged, and that would be a claim?
well, it's interesting you should mention that. I didn't, what you're talking about. Can you kind of explain so they wanted you to basically redo the designs to accommodate the land surveyor?
No, fortunately, I didn't have to redo. I had to add two dimensions. It wasn't a big deal, and I was able to get on it very quick. But what happened was, I had I had done the foundation drawing, well, the entire drawings. Foundation drawings had all the all of the dimensions to it, but there was one wall that I dimensioned it a different way, and in my haste to get these out to them, did not complete the last two dimensions that I needed to make it easy for the surveyor to go around. They actually had to do a little bit of math to go and find the one wall. It literally, if they would have added things up and subtracted another number, they would have had it, and it would have taken 3 seconds. But because, and I think it was because the homeowner had been kind of pushing them, so they were looking for a way to slow things down. So at the end of the day, they threw out an email saying, "Hey, things are missing." They showed what was missing, and if we don't have this first thing in the morning, we're going to have to reschedule. Of course, the homeowner was upset. I got on there, added the two dimensions, sent it to them, and made sure that they were able to fulfill the timeline because it was there, and they had it. But prior to that, he had mentioned that, hey, if we have to reschedule, that's going to cost me so much, and I think I should put this back on you because you forgot the dimensions. I mean, is
Yes.
that
So
what we're
that's
talking about?
yes, that is
Okay.
exactly what we're talking about. So fortunately for you, I mean, that looked like a really small, like a really quick fix, like you could just, right, you could take care of. But imagine that if that wasn't the case, if it was something that would have taken you, it was like 2 weeks worth of work and that guy wanted it tomorrow, right? You would never be able to complete what he wanted. So that you would notify the policy for that, right? So that is a claim because that guy is saying the owner, in effect, the owner is saying that if you guys don't fix this, then you're going to owe me whatever he said, right? Whatever he
Mm-hmm.
said was the
Yeah.
delay, right? So that is definitely a claim. So that's something that you would notify the policy. I mean, a lot of times if there's like a quick fix, I would definitely like this one, right? That's not even worth telling your insurance carrier, right? So if you could just fix it quickly, I would just do it. There's also a couple provisions in the policy that will help you with something like that. There's one called pre-claims assistance where there's an issue, and this is on all of the policies where if you think that there's an issue that the owner hasn't said, the owner hasn't said like, hey, you owe me money, you messed up and you owe me money, but you think that there could be an issue. Like, so this one right here, you fixed the issue, but you think that these people are very problematic and there could be something else down the line, right? There could be other problems. You might consider notifying your carrier as a pre-claims matter, because then if there is something that you could further do to rectify the situation, they might give you they might compensate you or the owner in order to rectify the situation before it becomes an actual full-blown claim. So that's a determination that the carrier will make. There's actually also an endorsement on this policy called rectification, which instead of leaving it for the carrier to determine, you could purchase that coverage directly, right? Which will say, hey, we'll advance certain sums to you to rectify matters that would otherwise lead to a professional liability claim on the policy. So there's some provisions in the policy that'll allow you to report that. But otherwise, I mean, I think, you know, that is definitely a claim. I think the way that you handle it is probably the best way. Just to, if it takes you like an hour or something just to satisfy them, that's probably the best way to handle it. But if it was not something that you could handle in that matter, then you would definitely want to report that to the policy, because they made a demand. They're saying you messed up and we need money.
Okay. Yeah. And by the way, can you forget I mentioned that because you are my carrier. So
Yeah. Well, I will let you know though. One of the things about notifying your carrier is you should notify your carrier. If you think that you don't want to be the person who's like overly notifying, because then they're going to be like, well, what's wrong with this person? It seems like they have a lot of activity. But you do want to notify, if you know something is happening, you do want to notify your insurance carrier, whether it's us or anybody else. Because otherwise what they could say is you actually, and let's just say you something happened, but you didn't think that it was going to be anything. And then 6 months later, it becomes a full-blown claim. Well, they could say, well, you actually knew about this 6 months ago and you didn't report it. And they could deny the coverage on basis of late reporting. So as soon as you know that something's happening that you think could be a really big deal, you should always notify your carrier so that they don't deny you in the future based on late reporting. Like, for example, Dennis, like this matter that you talked about, if you wanted, I don't know what the circumstance, if you think it's a really big deal and these people are like they're going to cause you problems, you might want to notify it to Markel as a pre-claims matter, saying like, they came after me for this. I did a quick fix. This is what I did. You know, I'm just putting in a notification right now. There's no claim right now. Nothing needs to be done. Like you could do something like that if you thought that these people were going to cause you trouble down the line. So that was actually a really good pre-claims example. I didn't think about, but that's something I could probably use in the future when I describe that pre-claims example. But here's another claims example that I have that's probably pretty familiar to a lot of people. So a homeowner hires a building designer, maybe you, to create a set of new home plans compliant with local building codes. And a homeowner gets the bid from several contractors, and they of course end up hiring the lowest bidding contractor. And the project gets completed 12 months behind schedule. It's over budget. And the homeowner comes back to you 18 months later and says, hey, you know, this thing went completely sideways. I'm suing the contractor. I'm also going to sue you because, you know, your home plans, there's something missing. It delayed us getting building approval. You know, you contributed to our inspection delays and overall project delays, and I think you owe me $10,000 or whatever it is that they want to say, right? So this is a really good claims example. Again, whether or not you had something to do with it, we don't know. But the fact is that they're upset. You know, it's over budget, it's a year behind schedule, and they're going to sue everybody on the job. So this is a great example of kind of when your professional liability policy could step in. They would step in to defend you in the claim. And then if it was found that you did contribute to those delays, like, hey, you know, you did miss something and you needed an extra 1 month to redo the plans, which caused those inspection delays, which caused the contractor to fall behind schedule. He had to redo his subs. The trades were coming in at different times now, and you're 20% responsible for those delays. Then, you know, this policy, the professional liability policy could potentially cover those damages. So kind of tied to this, a couple questions that I always get is, number one, well, what if I make no representations about building codes, right? Like, I'm only selling my plans online. I don't do anything about building codes. I don't guarantee any of that. Well, you know, I think a lot of people, a lot of building designers are selling their plans online, and that's great. If you don't guarantee any kind of code compliance or anything, that definitely reduces your exposure, but that doesn't eliminate the possibility of somebody suing you, right? We live in the United States, and lawsuits are very common. So it's definitely something to think about, right? Because if you're only selling your plans online, yes, it's true. You have reduced exposure, right? And then if you add in something like really good contract risk management, like the second one, another question I get all the time is, I have provisions in my contract that limit my liabilities to fees that I receive. That's also really excellent risk management. It definitely reduces your exposure. But the fact is that contractual limitations of liabilities are not upheld in court. So especially in a state like California, they throw them out. In Texas, sometimes yes, sometimes no. They're not reliable. But I will say what they're good for is, if an owner comes back to you, what they are good for is you can point to your contract and say, hey, contractually, this is what we agreed to, in hopes of them settling, so that you don't take the case any further and nobody incurs legal costs. So what they are good for is just referring back to the contract for mediation or dispute resolution, but they're not good to rely on as a fallback, like in court, the judge is definitely going to rule in my favor and uphold these liability caps, because that's not necessarily the way that it's going to go. So I have a couple of questions. Oh, but these are comments. Okay, great. Okay, great. These are we're all in agreement.
So there is a good question, and I don't know. The very first comment was from Audrey Allen, and it's a really good question. But I'm not sure if it would be better served if we waited until the end.
Was it the one about the E&O requirement, the $2 million E&O requirement?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, we can get to that one at the end.
Okay.
And then, so moving along on the presentation, there's only like a couple more slides, but the second most common question that I get is, if I purchase a policy for the first time today, will I have coverage for the work I did yesterday or last month or last week or last year? And then variations of this question is very common. So if it's your first time ever purchasing, and this I mentioned this earlier about how professional liability policies work. There's a claims made date, which is when the claim is actually made, reported to you. And then there's a retroactive date, which basically establishes up to when your work was performed that the policy would provide coverage for. I don't know if that was said in an elegant manner, but so essentially what it's saying is that if this is the first time you've ever purchased a professional liability policy, then your retroactive date will be today, right? Today would be the retroactive date, which means any work you performed before today would not be covered. Now, if you've had like 5 renewals and you're moving your coverage to Draftrs from somebody else, then you just carry over that retroactive date and you would have that same coverage that you did from 5 years prior. But this is actually quite important because a lot of people, they might think, hey, I have this owner and they're causing me a lot of problems. I'm going to go buy a professional liability policy now, just in case something happens. Well, you can't do that, right? In fact, that's technically fraud, right? Because you know that you're potentially going to get a claim. You can't buy a policy after the fact. Insurance is not supposed to cover known losses. It's supposed to cover fortuitous losses that you did not know about, losses that you did not foresee. So one of the most important things is, if it's the first time you're purchasing a policy, don't expect that it's going to cover you for any of the work that you did yesterday or even a year ago or last week, right? What it's going to cover you is for work that you do from today onwards. So none of the work you did in the past would be covered. So that's just something I felt like maybe some people needed to kind of understand, so that they know that, you can't just say like, hey, I think I'm going to get a claim on this job. This owner's being really difficult. I'm going to buy a policy right now, because that claim will be denied by the carrier for prior notice or prior knowledge, I should say. And this kind of explains that a little bit more. How is a professional policy triggered? So a claim first must be made during the policy period. So if you buy a policy now, a 1-year policy, it's going to go from 2023 to 2024. So a claim must be made by an owner during that policy period. And then the allegations of the services must have been performed on or after the retroactive date. So that's how one of these professional policies are going to be triggered. And of course, they have to allege errors in professional services as well. So one of the most important things is, and I had somebody call this morning, I think he was from AIBD, but he was looking to move the policy over from his current one. And the most important thing is to carry over that retroactive date. If you're moving, whether it's to Draftrs or to another insurance carrier, the most important thing for you to do is to carry over your retroactive date. You don't want to lose the coverage. And if you stop buying a policy for whatever reason, if you have a year where you don't purchase policy insurance, you're going to lose that retroactive date. So you need to maintain consistent coverage in order to maintain that retroactive date. So I think that's like pretty much it for the actual presentation. I tried to go over a lot of common questions that I hear all the time. And then I think there were a couple more questions that showed up on the chat. And I also wanted to leave extra time for any of the questions that you might have for any specific issues that you might be having with your insurance. So I think I'll move and I'll kind of answer that first question that Audrey put up at the beginning of the chat. So that first question was, there's a city program that's requiring 2 million in E&O limits with a tail coverage for 24 months. Do you offer, and what does that do to the rates? Okay. So yes, we do offer. So our program goes up to 2 million in limits, and we do offer tail coverage. Tail coverage is actually mandatory. Carriers have to offer people tail coverage, but how does that tail coverage work? So there's a couple of things. Audrey, this city program, are they asking you to provide a specific, like a $2 million limit specifically to them, or can you cover it and carry it in an annual policy? So if you want to look that up, because I'll explain the difference, because the tail coverage, so as long as you consistently for the next 24 months, if you are renewing your policy, that is tail coverage, right? So if you continually carry insurance for the next 24 months, that is tail coverage. What they specifically want when people ask for you to buy an upfront tail coverage, that's actually a project specific policy. And you can buy the tail coverage upfront. It's 24 months on the policy. But typically people are going to purchase it when they go out of business. Like when they're done working, they're going out of business. They might say, okay, I'm going to buy an additional 3 years worth of coverage in case some of my past clients for the next 3 years, they try to sue me. So then they'd have coverage for that. That's what that tail coverage is for. So what the city is really saying to you is, we want you to cover $2 million. And then once the job is over, we want to be sure that for the next 24 months, we can still sue you. That's essentially what they're saying. That's why they want you to have that 24 months of tail. But if you are renewing your insurance policy, you have that tail, right? As long as you have consecutive coverage, they could still sue you and you'd have an insurance carrier who would defend you. So, you can explain that to them. Buying 24 months of tail, it's basically like 150% of your annual premium, right? So 12 months of tail is about 100% of your annual premium. And then 24 months of tail is like 150% of your 24 months is 150% of it. So it's something like that. It's on some kind of rating table. All carriers rate for it in a very similar fashion. It's like 100% for the first 12 months, and then 150 to 180% for the next 12 months, or some formula like that. But the thing is that if instead of buying out that tail, you could just renew your policy. If you renewed your policy every year, like you're not going out of business, you're adding more work, it'll cover your new work too. It accomplishes the same thing. So 24 months, unless the city is looking specifically for you to carry a limit dedicated to them, which they might do sometimes.
I don't know if you can even read that.
I can't see that, but you can just email it to me?
I can do that.
If you could possibly put your email in the chat section, that would be great.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
So here's another question from Lori. If I designed a plan 2 years ago, but sold it to a client who 2 days after I purchased insurance, and then that client comes after me for a mistake or something, am I covered? So you designed a plan 2 years ago, like you sold it online, you mean? Like you designed it 2 years ago, but you just sold a copy of it yesterday online, for example?
Correct. And maybe I had sold it several times prior to obtaining insurance, but
yeah,
this client that's coming after me, I had already purchased insurance. Would it be covered?
Yes. So this is a great question. This actually came up with AIBD as well. So these types of claim scenarios are very nuanced. It really depends on like the circumstances of the claims. I actually talked to the Markel claims team about this one specifically. And so this is where the nuance comes in, right? So if the allegations against you, if the claim against you is on something like misrepresentation, then the policy would cover you for the date that you made the misrepresentation, which is when you sold the policy, right? So you would have coverage for it. But if it was actually on the basis of some error in the design, well, you designed it 2 years ago, so that might not be covered. But the fact is that when these claims are made, if it's a real claim, a lawyer got their hands on it, they're going to be putting everything in. They're going to be claiming design errors, misrepresentation, negligence. They're going to be throwing all of that in. So one of those things, depending on which allegation is being made, if they're making a series of them, like 5 of them, and a lot of lawyers will do that. They'll make 5 allegations in order to trigger things like insurance, right? Or, you have 5 claims and maybe one of them will stick. But depending on what the allegation is, there could be coverage under the policy and there may not be. So something like misrepresentation would definitely cover like when you made the misrepresentation, which is when you sold the policy, but an actual error, that would probably not be covered. So it really just kind of depends.
Okay. So what if I revised the plan a little bit and made it a new plan?
That's good. I would say do that. So I think Audrey and I actually had this discussion too. And I think a lot of times, like even if you do like small revisions, you make a new like revision version, that definitely helps your case too. But the misrepresentation part is a big part of it too, because that will actually get you a good amount of coverage in there too. If you're doing misrepresentation and negligence, those are 2 that'll definitely trigger the policy. But to be extra sure, if you said that it's not just the old plan from 2 years ago, I had to make changes or updates, or I did something new to it, and you put a new version on that, then that's something it's good. And if you're selling it, why not put a new version copy on it?
Right. Got it. Thank you.
So then we have another one from Fred Blom. What differentiates carriers besides the cost of coverage, assuming equal coverage? What differentiates carriers? Well, there's a couple of things that you want to look out for. The first thing is whether you have an admitted policy or a surplus policy. So for all purposes, is surplus lines, it's not guaranteed by the state. So in case that carrier goes out of business, it's not part of the state's carrier pool, right? So it's basically there's no insurance on the insurance from your state. So that's one of the things. So our policy is admitted, but a lot of policies are written on a surplus basis for various reasons, and there's extra taxes and fees. Apart from that, another thing that you want to look for your carrier is who is it, right? Or have they been around for a long time? Who are they? Like, are they just and a lot of times you could tell by their rating, right? So, Markel is they've been around for a really long time. They've been around for over 50 years doing professional liability. They have an A rating, but there are certain carriers that are new in the market. They might have only been writing business for 10 years. They might have an A- rating or something like that. So those are some of the things that you want to look for. You just want to look for a carrier with stability who's been in the market for a long time. Because at the end of the day, you're buying this policy because you expect somebody to pay claims. So you want that carrier, you want to have the confidence knowing that that carrier is going to be around. So that's one of the things that you might want to look for. Certain carriers also might offer additional programs, risk management programs and services. So we don't actually offer any through Markel. The only thing that's offered is that pre-claims assistance. But when you get to larger accounts like middle market and large account business, some carriers will offer things like contract reviews, et cetera. When you're in the small firm space, it becomes it becomes more difficult. Some carriers will offer maybe like an hour worth of risk management consultation. So that's maybe something else that you'd want to consider. So the next question from Robert, does your company typically settle regardless of fault? I know of different construction claims attorney that love when they do shotgun lawsuits because those with E&O almost always settle to make it go away. They often count on it. Yes, I will say, yes, that's a big part of it, right? Especially if, the claims value is low. If the demand, especially for what you all are doing, right? If you only charged them $5,000, it would be outrageous for the person to say, I'm going to sue you for $5 million and you only took $5,000 in fees. So a lot of times the claims against you, they might just say like, hey, just give us $5,000 and we'll go away. And a lot of times carriers will just pay it. And that's because $5,000, you know, if this goes into a lawsuit, they're going to pay a lot more than that in legal fees. And carriers make that determination when they're looking at claims. They're looking at what's the likelihood that this is going to get dragged out. How much is it going to cost in defense costs? Should we just pay now to settle? And that's a big part of when we're talking about small firms. That's a big part of how they adjust the claims. And that's what they should be doing, right? I think, you know, at the carrier that I used to work at, that was a lot of it. If it was under a certain amount, we would try to just pay it and get it off our desk. Because otherwise, you know, what you're risking down the line is a larger claim settlement. And not only that, the potential of a bad faith claim. So carriers are also very afraid of bad faith claims. You know, an insured coming back and saying, like, you didn't handle this in a very fair way, I'm going to sue you, right? Not because of the policy, but I'm going to sue you because you mishandled my claim. So that's something that carriers definitely consider. Okay, so that's about it on the group chat Q&A. Does anyone else have any other questions that you were thinking?
I have some questions from actually our group. When I first brought this up, I had a few people ask questions. And I told them that I would ask those questions, see if we had time. So, and if you want to answer Robert's follow-up question real quick while I find these ones, that would be great.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So Robert's asking, because I had a claim, it cost me more and my rates go up or get dropped. Yes. Yes. Unfortunately, Robert, that does happen. So like if you do have, so our policy specifically, we have a max of up to 15K in claims before we start declining business. And the same thing like on renewals, right? So if they pay more than 15, then you will no longer qualify for the program. And then same thing with the rates. So if you have any kind of claims activity, then that does have it does the rates, your premium does go up. That being said, I mean, I don't expect that you guys are getting like a high, these shouldn't be claims that are happening to you like every year, right? I mean, a lot of professionals, it's a lot of times, a lot of people don't even get any claims, right? But you know, this shouldn't really be like a frequency issue. Like we shouldn't be seeing claims every year. If that is happening, then there's probably something else going on. But yeah, I would say, especially for what we're doing, you know, getting one claim every now and then is totally fine for the program. But it's just that if you're starting to see a high volume of these, or if the dollar values are really high, then that's when that would be a problem for this carrier in particular, for Markel.
So I'm looking at, I think the only question that I really had from the group was, oh shoot, now I got to find it again. Oh, we wanted to know if it was possible to create a group insurance, something for, where'd it go? I just saw it. And can a group insurance policy be created? So a group of designers get together.
Yes, but I would definitely not recommend that. So a lot of associations actually run their programs like that. So they'll have a group plan. I'm seeing this a lot. We have another program for mediators. And I see this a lot in the mediator space. I would not recommend it for what you all are doing in the mediator space, because there's actually not a lot of claims activity. So what these people have is there's an association and there's probably about 400 members or so, or 500. I don't know. We don't do this association. But one of the members was telling me the program that they have, but they have about 400 or 500 members, and they have one policy. It's 500 per claim, 2 million in limits, and it covers all 500 members. So if one person makes a claim, it could pretty much just like blow everything out, and then nobody has coverage anymore, right? So it's actually 500 per claim, 2 million. So if 4 people were to make a claim that year, then there's no more coverage available for anybody. So I think for mediators that could work, because they don't have, honestly, the claims activity for them is really not that high. But for building designers and construction architects, anybody in construction, it's probably not advisable to create a group plan like that. Like we certainly didn't, that wasn't the approach that we wanted to take for AIBD. I think it's much better for everybody to carry their own policy. Another thing is that it could be cheaper overall, but that's because you're just not getting any coverage, right? Like if you have 500,000 per claim, 2 million in the aggregate. It's really just covering 4 people. And AIBD, for example, I don't know what the membership is. It's a couple thousand members. Like there's really no, you're paying for almost net, like there's a good chance by the time you make a claim, there are no more limits available because 4 other members have already made that claim.
That's a great answer. Thank you. So does anybody else have any questions for Audrey? Any comments? Any concerns? Anybody want to sign up for insurance right now?
Well, one of the things that I also wanted to mention was on your Facebook chat. I mean, if you guys had questions, you could definitely just put them on there. I don't use Facebook very much anymore, but so I don't even know. To be honest, like I don't even know how the notifications happen. But I like if you at me on Facebook, if it sends me a notification. Definitely, if you guys have questions as you guys are going along, you get a contract requirement or something like that, feel free to just post it onto I actually like it if it's posted on the message board because then everybody gets to see it. Somebody else might have the same question. So, you know, in the future, if you guys have any questions, please post them on that Facebook group. If there's some way like that you can at me so that I get an email notification, then I can definitely go in and respond to those.
Yeah, we can make sure that happens, I think. I'll watch for anybody who does that. And if they don't do that, I'll try to remember to do that for you. That way we can get to them quickly. Any other questions? Going once. I feel like an auctioneer. Okay.
Awesome. Well, just so you all know also, I haven't booked it yet, but I am doing a second webinar for AIBD, which is going to be around contracts. It's going to be focused on like the top four contract provisions that you should have in your contract. So that's something that I'm going to be doing probably in November. I was thinking first week of November. Maybe I've got a little bit of travel coming up. So maybe the first or second week of November is when I'm planning that. And I don't know what the overlap is. Are a lot of the members here also AIBD? Like, is it majority or not at all?
Yeah, there's some members here that are AIBD. There's some members here that are former AIBD. There's some members here who don't want to become a member of anything.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, it's a mixture.
Except for the Facebook group. Okay.
Yeah, so it's not that big of a deal. Like, so I'm the chapter chair of the Eastern Shore AIBD. So sometimes I'll have things on here and then later on try to get that same person on the chapter as that one grows. So I may reach out to you again for that. But this here, I do this because we have I have such a large group of designers and professionals. And then what I'll do is I'll take this same video and I'll pop it up on YouTube so that they can keep watching it and keep going back to it. And then if we get enough questions and stuff, what I'll do is I'll reach back out to you and see if we can do another one.
Okay.
So
yeah, no, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely. So once we do that, like if there's interest here, I could just do that presentation over for this group too, if there's interest.
I'm pretty sure there's going to be interest because of the contracts section. There's a lot of people, and honestly, just because you do it on the AIBD, they may watch it on the AIBD and they'll want to see it again.
See it again, yeah.
It's important. This is our livelihood. So, you know, it gets very important for us to be able to do things that aren't going to force us out of what we do for a living. So,
yeah, totally.
So it's, you know, we support the AIBD considerably. But at the same time, I want to make sure that we support the entire design profession. I don't want to, you know, we have interior designers, we have landscape designers, we have architects, we have professional designers, we have drafters who don't consider themselves designers. They consider themselves drafters, and they're very good at what they do. So we have the whole realm. And all of them are very important to this profession. So we need to make sure that we have all the information we can give them. So, yeah, that's where we're at. So that's what this group was formed for.
Okay, awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys spending the last hour here. It was great seeing some again. Audrey, good seeing you again. And I look forward to kind of working with you all some more.
Weren't you at Nashville?
No, I wasn't. I was going to go, but I didn't go in the last minute. I'm not sure why, but I was talking to, I think his name's Ted. So Ted is
Yeah.
he's the chair of AIBD.
Hmm.
And he said that there's going to be something in San Antonio in July.
Yeah.
I'm in
Yep.
Dallas, but my in-laws are in San Antonio. So we go down to San Antonio all the time. So I'll probably go try to do the San Antonio one in July next year.
Yeah, I'm hoping to. It's far away from me.
Yeah,
Anyways,
yeah.
yeah. So anyways, I guess we're gonna go ahead and close. We're coming up on close to an hour. We do try to keep them in that area. Sometimes they go much longer, but we will have the video up hopefully this week, depending on what my schedule ends up looking like with drawings. I do try to jump on these quickly. I'll jump on it tomorrow probably, but if things get in the way, we might go a little longer than a week. I'm sorry, but I will try to get it out as quickly as I can. And if there's any other questions real quick, we can ask them. Otherwise, we're gonna go ahead and end this. So, all right. So everybody, thank you for showing up, and we're gonna go ahead and go. And Audrey, thank you so very much for doing this for us. I look forward to possibly having you back for more.
Thanks for having me,
And-
Dennis.
Yep, no problem. And Sam, thank you for being such a big part of making sure these things happen. I appreciate it. You can bring on many more. I'm okay with that. Everybody have a good day. I'm going to end this now. So everyone have a great day.